Play. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
JT,
Thank you so much for that, Stanley. Just pumping us up with all that energy.
JT's home, period.
You are so excited. I love the excitement. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard, where we talk politics, social justice, pop culture, and JT being home. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Shout out to Stanley for kicking it off with JT home. No, First Day Out. That is her new single now that she is released.
JT, First Day Out, mommy.
Yeah, she is. My name is Selena Hill. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Miss Selena Hill. Please follow me there. We have a great show lined up. We're actually going to use JT finally being released from prison to talk about the ongoing debate about prison abolition versus reform. We know that we've been hearing things about this in social justice circles for decades, years on end, and I really want to understand why people are calling for just the end, the abolition of prison whatsoever. So, we have a great guest here. Before we get to her, we have Evan filling in as our trusty correspondent.
Thank you.
Evan, please introduce yourself.
My name is Evan Mastronardi. I'm co-founder of Let's Not Be Trash with my boy Stanley Fritz.
What up?
I cannot compete with that Henny-fueled intro.
No one can compete.
I don't think anybody else can, but you can find me at @_Mastronardi and Evan J. Mastronardi on Facebook.
Oh, and yes, Stanley, can we please introduce Brittany?
Yes, there is a black queen in this space. Let me tell you something, guys. You thought Hennessy and apple juice was a perfect combination. Have you ever had Douce and more Douce? Because that's who Brittany Williams is. A member of No New Jails, a black queen, an activist, a
Somebody
writer,
dropping bars
a dancer, someone who is going to be here and educate all of you beloveds, and some of you, I can't say that word on air, never mind. Talk to me on Let's Not Be Trash. But Brittany, please introduce yourself and tell these wonderful folks how they can talk to you.
Hey, y'all. My name is Brittany. I am a member of No New Jails. I have something that could top it. We shut down the entrance of Rikers Island yesterday, calling for Mayor Bill de Blasio to basically say we need to close Rikers Island right now, and connecting it to the mass movement that's happening across the country with close to camps. So a cage is a cage, whether you are holding up immigrants and undocumented people in a cage, or black and brown people, black people in the cage, poor people in the cage, it's the same thing. You can follow me on Instagram at MissBrit_305, BRITT_305.
305 Live. Oh, so you're really happy JT's home then?
Oh, listen, Dade County all day.
Wow, okay, straight from the 305. Yes, so we have a great show lined out. And before we get to that in-depth conversation about why it is important for us to close prison, particularly from Brittany's perspective, we're also going to be talking about a lot of other things going on in the news. We know that Caps People put out a statement. We know that Tekashi 6ix9ine signed a $10 million deal. So there's so much going on. And of course, if you want to let your voice be heard, you can leave us a comment in real time on Facebook.com/LetYourVoiceBeHeard. You can tweet us at BeHeardRadio, BeHeard_radio. And you can also call us up. The number is 212-650-6903. Again, that's 212-650-6903. All right, and on that note, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We're jumping straight into some of the craziest things that happened over the week. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard.
That's my type. That's my type. We are back on Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM WHCR, the voice of Harlem. If you are just tuning in, this is Stanley Fritz. I'm here with Selena Hill, Evan Mastronardi, also known as Comrade Bay to the ladies who are single, and of course, Brittany
it's a new one every time.
Williams. And of course, we can never be complete without our latest intern of all latest interns, Mariah. And she's out here with the fitted snapback, and she just put out an amazing think piece on LetYourVoiceBeHeard.com. You need to check that out and support this queen. And she took some lit pictures because she has a camera.
Thank you for that, Stanley. I was interested in your type. You started singing those sweetie lyrics.
My type is Marilyn Bryant because black men do not cheat.
That's right.
Great answer. Perfect answer on that one. Okay, so so we're gonna jump things off into the news roundup. Some of the stories that made us really upset, tweet, laugh, cry, whatever it is. If you felt an emotion, let's talk about it now. I want to start things off talking about Colin Kaepernick. We know that, as I mentioned before we went on break, his team, they actually put out a statement combating many of the myths and rumors that are circulating around why he still has had a job in the NFL for years now, ever since he started the dynamic Take a Knee protest. So, Sally, what did you think about the statement? They said that Cap has been training 5 days a week. He is ready to play. He is fit. They said that he never walked away from a deal. He wasn't presented one. And they also said that the reason why he had to leave from playing with San Francisco was because they were going to fire him. They gave him an ultimatum. They said, you can either leave voluntarily or we're gonna cut you. So what did you think about the statement and some of the myths that they combated?
Duh. Only people that thought that didn't know this was white folks or people who love the police. Like everybody else knew that this is what.
So like 2/3 the NFL fan base, basically.
Like more than that, probably like 80% of the NFL fan base, really. But yeah, there was no surprise about this. I'm glad that he put it out because it informed somebody who needed to be informed. But I don't think anyone really wants to be informed because either you're with Kaepernick at this point or you're not. And if you're not, there's nothing that he can do to convince you. So it is what it is.
Evan, what did you think about the statement?
Well, I think, like Stanley said, I think this is pretty much known to most people who've been studying this and know why he takes a knee. I mean, he has essentially been blacklisted within the NFL. Even if it's not a statement, the results say it. This man is capable. He is training. He has not been hired even for a backup position. Now, some people say that one of the reasons they believe Jay-Z made that deal is because they think down the line he's going to have a role in trying to get him on a team and he's going to try to have part ownership of a team. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if that's true. I hope it is. I hope it's part of the deal. But personally, I don't think this is going to change for a while until public opinion does, and I don't have much hope in public opinion.
Yeah.
Or the NFL ownership. Yeah.
Brittany, what are your thoughts on Cap taking a knee and the fact that he still doesn't have a job?
So I just want to say that Jay-Z is a black capitalist. And I don't think, let's be real, him taking a job or taking that deal has nothing to do with Kaepernick. So let's separate those two things first, right? Before he didn't take that job. I mean, before Jay-Z took the job, did he say publicly he's going to do X, Y, and Z for Kaepernick?
Nope.
Not for Kaepernick specifically.
Exactly. So that's the issue right there. You can have and Kaepernick, like we know, we have a history of this, of being blacklisted, of being targeted. Right now, we have seen what has been happening in Ferguson. The black organizers and activists who have rose up, they're finding their bodies dead. Mm-hmm. So let's not act like the NFL will hire him because they want to keep their status quo.
Mm. And, I mean, apparently Jay-Z spoke with Colin Kaepernick before this whole deal and pretty much disregarded most of his statements, or at least did not fight to have him involved in his involvement.
That's speculation. Jay, what we do know is, from Jay's point of view, he did say that yes, he's had conversations with Kaepernick. I personally think that the conversation did not go well. Something was disrupted. Yeah. I would obviously, with Jay-Z partnering with the NFL, it would only make sense if he was advocating on behalf of Cap. We have to see what happens.
Jay-Z's an employee. He was looking for a paycheck. He got one.
But can I just say, like, with the clout that Jay-Z has, it's very hard for me to believe he couldn't have done anything public for Kaepernick to make this partnership happen, to say, hey, he's got to have some input in this. Jay-Z has a lot of clout. If the NFL really wanted this image, I think he could have got something done. It is unfortunate. I just wanted to mention what I've heard some people say, including Killer Mike, that this may be down the line in his plans. I don't see evidence of it. I just wanted to put it out there since we were on the topic.
What, to get Colin Kaepernick a backup quarterback job when he's 37 years old and too old?
I don't know how it's going to happen.
Like, that's what's going to happen. I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. Kaepernick is finally going to get a job somewhere when he's 36, 37 years old, where he's too old and been out of the game too long to be productive anymore. And they're going to say this is a big sign of progress and Kaepernick really changed. And then they're going to honor him, and then they're going to use his likeness and his story so that the NFL can look progressive while making money off of a man they blocked in the league for years. We know know this game. This is the game that white people play all the time. And Jay-Z, who is my favorite rapper, is a sellout.
Well, that being said, Stanley, I do want to just move things along to talk about, again, selling out. We know Tekashi 6ix9ine. He is a federal informant. He sold out everybody, including Cardi B, Jim Jones, people who have no affiliation with this man. But in return of selling out, it looks like he's going to have a reduced prison sentence. And on top of that, he has a $10 million deal with the same label that he was signed with before he went into prison. So apparently the former label, which is 10K Records, they believe so much in this man. They believe that once he is out of jail, he can just sell records and just be some type of iconic figure in hip hop. Evan, what do you think?
He's not going into protection anymore? What happened to that? I mean, it wasn't going to work. Everybody, he can't just work at Costco. We're going to know it's Tekashi 6ix9ine. But I'm saying, I thought he was going to try to I thought it was actually offered to be in witness protection. This is the exact opposite of that. He's really going to be on blast.
Oh, he turned that down. He said he will pay for his own security.
Oh, okay. So yeah. that's what's going to happen. Okay. It doesn't surprise me. I mean, he's infamous, and people will pay to deal with infamy, to see it. Infamy is profitable. It does not surprise me that this happened.
Can I say something about this?
Yes, go ahead, Stanley.
Because I know I'm corny, and let's be very clear, I'm a square, but I grew up in East New York and Brownsville, and there were certain rules you live by, and I have a deep respect for street code, and it really bothers me of how much people just don't respect street code anymore, but they love street-ish, and it really, really bothers me. And he's getting money. This is disgusting. And if he actually got this deal and he puts music out, and anybody who I hear listening to that music, I can't really bang with, because this is nasty.
Brittany, before we get to your thoughts, I just want to give a shout out to BB Mendez, who left a comment on our Facebook Live. She says, "Why do people keep giving 69 a platform?" Brittany?
Let's back up. He's an informant. He is an informant. When Pantaleo killed Eric Gardner, how much money did he get? An informant of the government. They protect their own, and they make sure they have all the money that they need to live a comfortable life. So let's be really clear about this. He was never in the streets. He infiltrated, got information that he wanted, and we see he will serve a little bit of time and get paid for him serving his time, which is a part of his deal as well. That's how I look at it.
No, I mean, I think that pretty much sums it up in a nutshell. I think it's sad. I don't know if it's this new generation, Gen Z, who is like, hey, he's real, or I don't know. I don't get it. I don't understand people who can continue to support this man. I will say this, before he was locked up, I did like his music, but what he has done and put in the lives of so many people in jeopardy, that it shouldn't have went down like this.
Yeah, it's not like he's disclosing really relevant information to important crimes that haven't been solved for a while, or people have been murdered that there's real justice needs to be served. He's just selling out anybody on the top of his head, essentially, to be able to reduce his sentence. And he just turned on a dime from, acting like he's untouchable. We all saw those interviews he did with Charlemagne, and then all of a sudden being like I said, turn on a dime and being an informant and just rattling off people's names.
He didn't even spend 24 hours in lockup before he started snitching.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Come on, man.
Well, like Ebony K. Williams from State of the Culture, what she said is, as a former defense attorney, right, she said, she would advise some of, her clients that if you're going to take a plea deal, or if you are going to advise, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do it in private. So, I mean, I guess it's the system itself where it's like, why do we have a system where if you rat other people out, it's in exchange for your own wrongdoing? If somebody did something wrong, they should be held accountable.
Right.
Why do they get reduced sentencing? Because they tell on other people who haven't gotten caught.
That's when we get to talking about the whole system. Yes. Prison, that's something I think we should talk about, because, even though we don't like what happened to Tekashi 6ix9ine, this is part of the system. So anyway, but I know we'll get to that later.
Speaking of people caught up in the system, I want to throw it to Joshua Brown. Yeah. We know that 10 days after testifying in the trial of Amber Geiger, he was shot in the mouth. shot in the head, I believe. I mean, that's so. I mean, Brittany, you see the statement that the Dallas police put out. They're saying that he was involved in some type of drug deal gone wrong, where people from Louisiana crossed state lines to buy some weed from his home, and that literally they were like 2 or 3 deep, and then Joshua came outside.
Weed?
Right, from
Just
his
weed?
home and was like, oh, something happened, and then he shot or punched somebody, and then they killed him. I mean, it sounded like something on Power Empire, Brittany. What was your response to this whole mess going down around Joshua Brown? And the smear campaign, too.
I mean, so this is the history out. I feel like I don't want to throw all the history out, but like literally, how was Black Wall Street taken down? It started
bombed.
Exactly. Black and brown people protecting ourselves, showing up for each other, trying to hold the system accountable. We know that every time we do that, we're putting our lives on the line, right? I mean, we'll talk about a little bit about prison abolition, but like anytime we're fighting this jail fight here, like every organizer who is putting their bodies on the line is at risk for the same thing to happen, right? We're going against a $11 billion plan. And so I just want to say, like, this can happen to anyone that literally says, we want this for Black and brown people. We actually should have money to thrive. We actually should have resources in our community. So this is not a wake-up call, but it's like a history, generationally.
Absolutely.
Why Martin Luther King was assassinated.
We've seen this play out time and time again, Stanley. Were you at any way surprised or shocked when, Joshua Brown was shot down, and then the story the Dallas police put out, and now I just want to get to that smear campaign. So it was like the New York Post and other media outlets are talking about how he had an extensive criminal record. Stanley, we've seen this before.
Yeah, this is how they move. And it's not just Joshua Brown, rest in peace. It's also the sister that, not his sister, but another Black woman who went to the witness stand and spoke, and she lost her certification in her job. Winky dink, right? And Joshua Brown was supposed to testify in a civil suit against Amber Geyer and the Houston Police Department. But this is literally what they do. This is textbook. Come on. They traveled 5 hours for some weed vape pens and $4,000, and they didn't take anything. They murdered him, and they didn't take anything. They shot him in the mouth and the chest over drug money, but didn't take any of the drugs or the money. We know what time it is. I'm just surprised they didn't come up with a better lie. Usually they sprinkle crack on you. This is just,
like Dave Chappelle said. Evan, go ahead.
Yeah, and the Post actually just posted an article about on body cam the LAPD sprinkling planting drugs on somebody. Yeah.
Are they really sprinkling crack?
It just reminded me. Yeah. And even though it's on video, somehow it was denied. Like you said, we noticed there's always a smear campaign, and it's like it's amazing to me that would change somebody's mind. Like the threshold for a person of color's life is that they have this rap sheet. Oh, it's okay. They resisted. Oh, it's okay. Like that's why it's Black Lives Matter, because it clearly doesn't matter to a lot of people if all of a sudden someone's a rap sheet. Oh, so then this is justified. Oh, then this is okay. Like. That doesn't mean that the death penalty is in the streets. It's always happened. It happens every time there's police brutality. Every time there is, find the worst picture, find the one stain on the person's life and put on blast.
And I know we do have to go on a quick break, but before we do, I just want to wrap things up on this segment with a little lighthearted news. So we know that Elizabeth Warren had an epic comeback at the equality town hall that CNN do. She was asked about same-sex marriage. If a man or someone said, I'm a traditional guy, my faith tells me I don't believe in same-sex marriage. And she said, well, tell that guy to marry one woman if he can find one.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, it was. She definitely dropped bars. So I just wanted to
give
was
some good spice. I agree.
Yeah, she spiced it up.
I just want to say, I don't know if you heard, but there was another woman shot in her own home in Texas. Fort Worth police shot a woman, Atiana Coquise Jefferson, died in her own home at 2:30 a.m. She was shot through a window in her own home. Through a window. Because somebody reported that there was a break-in. Apparently her door was open, and she was shot through a window. So put that together. Piece that one together.
No, it's also a different story out, though. The police actually went in the house.
Oh, so they went in there because the storehouse means they shot her through the window. I mean, there is no way this is good.
Yeah.
But when I heard, like, the door was open, she got shot through the window, I was like, how do you even announce yourself?
It doesn't, I mean, so far my efforts to end on a good note, but thank you for that, Evan.
It got to go out there that Texas did this again, anyway.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I don't know what's going on in Texas. But on that note, we have to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll speak more about what is going on in the prison system. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard.
I feel awkward for playing this song now, but you know. We are back on Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM WHCR, the voice of Harlem. This is Stanley Fritz. I'm here, of course, with Selena Hill. We got Evan Mastronardi, Kingsbridge Poppy, the first Italian Dominican, but he's never been to DR. And, of course, we have...
The first.
We have Brittany Williams. When she speaks, she hit a power elevating the room. And, of course, we have Mariah, the intern. She looks like she's sweet as sugar, and she is.
Hey.
That sounds weird, doesn't it?
It did, Stanley.
I mean that in a platonic way.
So before we went on break, BB Mendez, she left a comment. We were talking about what's going on in Texas. We know Joshua Brown was just shot, and we heard another breaking news story. So she said, this is still the South, and we know retaliation is real. People are speaking up more than ever, and the examples of black and brown people being silenced is taking over social media. You can't go a day without seeing it. Thank you so much, BB, for chiming into the conversation. We're going to throw it to Stanley because we need to talk about JT. She's home, and if we even, what's that correlation between that and prison abolition, Stanley?
Man, listen, JT's home. That's all I'm thinking about right now. I am very, very happy about that. The entire system it's not broken. It's working the way it should work. And it was literally crafted to make sure that black and brown people were in jails, or at least were giving free labor against their will since they couldn't do slavery anymore. But let's give you guys some background. So for those of you who don't know, the City Girls, one of the most amazing hip hop groups in the industry right now, had a big halt to their skyrocketing career. So after blowing up when Jay-Z included their vocals in the In My Feelings song, Jatavia, aka JT of the City Girls, had to stop everything she was doing and go to prison. Why? She had been arrested a couple of months earlier for fraud, and she had been out on bail and finally decided that she was going to serve out her time in a prison. And the way it was going to work was she got in around June 30th, 2018, and she wouldn't have been able to come out until March of 2020. She got out because of good behavior, and she put out this song called JT First Day Out. It's a song that we played at the beginning of the show. If you're listening to the podcast, you're never going to hear it because we don't want SoundCloud or Spreaker or iTunes or iHeartRadio or anyone else to take our show down for stealing music, even though we're not stealing it, those people. And in that song, she talked about the time she spent in there, talked about how she was upset that people were claiming she got pregnant from a CO, talked about pretty much growing up in this space that led her to this place that she is in now. And after being so inspired by JT's freedom and also that song and the stories that are similar to hers, we decided we want to have a conversation about the entire prison industrial complex. There are some people, especially most recently, who have been pushing for the complete abolition of all prisons. Why? Because we know it's a racist system, it does more harm than good, and if prison is about reform, it's not reforming anybody at all. It's breaking people, it's killing people, it's destroying families, and it's helping people become better criminals. But it's not actually dealing with harm, reforming the system, helping people get a fresh start. And then on the other side are people who think the prison system is not working, but there are ways you can fix the system without having to break the whole thing down. Because sure, maybe some people go to jail and prison because they don't deserve to, but I'm not really trying to be walking down the street with somebody who murdered someone last week and then them being outside again. That's their point of view. So today, guys, we are going to argue about all those things and many more, and we hope you can join us in this conversation. So before we even get to those conversations, let's start off with JT. So, Selena, I want to throw this to you first because I know we had a heated conversation about this on the Thursday call. So, JT came out. Do you think that she deserved to spend time in prison for the crime she committed?
That's a loaded question, but I'll answer it like this. I do believe and like what I said last week, if I'm going to advocate for Amber Geiger going to jail, being held accountable, a lot of us were very upset that she only got 10 years in prison. And as someone who admittedly is more conservative and more moderate on this issue when it comes to prison reform and prison abolition, if I think that Amber Geiger should be held accountable in prison, and Dylan Roof should also be in prison. It's hard for me to make an argument that someone else who commits a quote-unquote crime, whether it's white-collar, blue-collar, or whatever it is, should not be held accountable for their same actions. So that being said, I mean, I have to keep that same energy, Stanley.
Evan?
I don't believe just that sentences should be disproportionate based on crimes. I think actual prison should be disproportionate based on crimes. I don't think credit card fraud, especially like you and I have had conversations about, a lot of people, there's certain people who just do this for kicks. And there's certain people who it's like you only have so many means. And we even talked about this with Cardi B. Like, what she did was horrible, but also where she came from. So, no, I don't think she should have gone to prison. I think that certain crimes, like the ones you mentioned, absolutely deserve prison time. And I also believe, for example, like Sean King says, it's not that the criminal justice is broken, it's working exactly the way that it was supposed to. So I think that means that we have to dismantle the entire idea. Whether or not that means we don't have jails, I don't know about that. I think that the concept of jail should completely change to rehabilitation, and that's a longer conversation. But yes, I do believe that she should have been penalized, but I think it's a waste of money, and I don't think the punishment fits the crime for her to be in prison with so many people who have committed violent crimes.
Britt, what's your thoughts on this?
No one should be in jails or prison. We know that prisons and jails are tied to slavery. We know that free labor happens there. We know that most of the people that make up prisons and jails are black and brown people. Tell us what your community need, what you lack growing up. And how do we address that? How do we address that, right? Why no one, we're talking about people, throw them in jails. Like, accountability should not just happen in a punishment system. What does accountability look like in our churches, in our community centers, in our schools? Like, there's so many ways to hold people accountable, to address harm, to get to the root of violence, to get to the root of poverty. Was she doing this because she needed to survive, right? No one asked those questions. Instead, they say, hey, we're going to lock you up and cage you.
So, go ahead, Evan.
Now, I was going to say, I definitely agree with that, but the thing that I want to figure out is, like, the people that Selena mentioned, right? Mm-hmm. Amber Geiger, Dylan Roof, how would they be, if there's no prisons, right, how would they be punished for their actions?
So, here's the thing. When we're talking about harm, interpersonal violence, even if you look at an NYPD, someone was like, oh, we don't want, well, you mentioned earlier, Stanley, that we don't want to have the murderers and the rapists and all the folks around us, that mostly reformists, that's their argument. NYPD only solves 30% of those crimes. The rest of the 70% are walking around with us. They are the people who are in the schools, hiding, right? And so they don't actually address this issue. But what we do know is, if we look at the history of prisons and jails, most people that come out you're throwing them in a system of violence. You're throwing them in a system of transphobia. You're throwing them in a system that actually continues the history of people being harmed. Yeah. And so the question becomes around this, basically, how do you address these issues and alleviate harm? I mean, if someone says, I was harmed, I've been
violence committed to me.
Yeah. Where is the space for both people to have a transformation or deal with the issue? It's not there.
Well, that I agree with.
Brittany, it sounds like what you're saying, well, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying that the cases we just talked about were extreme. Mm-hmm. Most of the people locked up are black and brown for non-violent offenses. Mm-hmm. And that when we think of the mass scheme of things, this system is hurting our communities more so, even in spite of the fact that there's an emotional response. Like, people want to see Amber Geiger punished, right? People want to see Dylan Roof punished. And I guess that we just need to understand, and the bigger picture here is who's really being punished in the system. Stanley, I know we have a call on the line. Yeah. I want to throw it to the caller.
Yeah, we have a special caller. Alyssa Fuchs is on the line, guys. Alyssa, let your voice be heard.
Hey, Alyssa, so Alyssa, for those who don't know, she is one of the correspondents here and Let Your Voice Be Heard. She's also a civil rights attorney. Alyssa, we want to get your thoughts on, what do you think about the debate between prison reform versus prison abolition? Do you think all prisons should be abolished?
Hey, so, that's a good question, but I think the first thing that we need to focus on is if we want to abolish all prisons, then we have to reduce the amount of people that are in prison to begin with. And the way we do that is by addressing the issues in the community that actually causes people to go to prison. The majority of people who are in prison are not in there for violent crimes, which I think was already said. The majority of people who are in prison are for nonviolent crimes, many of them linked to poverty, drug abuse, mental health issues. And so if we actually spend the money to deal with those issues, to deal with the issue of poverty, to deal with the issue of mental health, to deal with the issue of drug abuse, then we will automatically reduce the amount of people that are in prison. In addition to that, even people that are in there for violent crimes, if you want to talk about gang violence, for example, many of that gang violence is also linked to poverty. People join gangs because they want protection, because they want to make money, because they don't have any means to support themselves otherwise. So then they get involved in violent crimes through a gang that they otherwise wouldn't be involved in if they had resources, if they had education. And so when we talk about prison reform, we can't just talk about getting rid of all prisons. Instead, what we have to focus on is how can we reduce the number of people that go to prison to begin with, whether we're talking about violent crimes or nonviolent crimes. And once we start to have that conversation, we realize that we could keep the majority of people out of prison by spending money in other ways to reduce poverty, to deal with mental health issues, and to reduce the amount of people doing drugs. Then we will realize that there's only a very small set of people that may actually need to be in prison, and then we can have a conversation about what we do with those people and whether they should be there to begin with.
Alyssa, thank you so much for that comment. If you also have a question, comment, or a curse word you want to share with us, no curse words, give us a call at 212-650-6903. Again, that's 212-650-6903. Brittany, I saw you nodding enthusiastically while Alyssa was speaking. Let me know what you were thinking.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I do agree with what she is saying. I'm also saying we also need to address harm and violence and all these things simultaneously. Because what we're seeing in New York City right now, when you literally are saying, the DOC is saying, well, you left us here with all the most violent people, right? No, we need to also address that simultaneously, because we know violence and interpersonal violence it has been impacting Black and brown people generationally. It is a cycle of violence that's connected to slavery. So if we're going to address this, we also have to address this. We cannot, as Black and brown people, the history of abolition, when Harriet Tubman, they bought people's freedom. That was organizing work on the grounds, right? Getting people to freedom, right? And so when we literally say that's legislative work, how are we in our communities going to hold people accountable? That work has to work simultaneously. It's not or separated, right? And so we can reduce the number of populations. Like, I was one of the people who helped create bail, speedy trial, and discovery when people literally told us in New York City that we need to accept the Caliph's law, which was a speedy trial ready rule, right? So yes, we can address that, but that won't actually address the culture of violence that is in jails. That won't actually address the fact that the city wants to, right now in New York City jails, the people who will serve who are serving a 1-year sentence is 9.58% of those people out of 7,000 people. That is 760 people who are in city jails at any given time serving time. So when we say basically that we want to close prisons and jails, we can do this, and we also at the same time can address the violence, the harm, interpersonal violence, etc., to keep us safe.
Got you. So, guys, we're going to go on a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to continue this conversation. Thank you, Alyssa, for calling in. Thank you, Brittany, for that great word right there. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard. We are back on Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM WHCR, the voice of Parliament. If you are just tuning in, this is Stanley Fritz. I'm here with Selena Hill and, of course, Evan Mashinardi and the immaculate Brittany Williams. Mariah's recording me on her camera because she's the littest of the littest lit interns, and she's always doing her job and taking a great flicks with the snapback fitted sitting on her head ever so gently. And we are here talking about the prison abolition debate. Selena, I know you got a comment for us on Facebook Live, and I got a caller. So let's get to your comment, and we'll get to the caller.
Absolutely. So Williams Altidore left a comment. Forgive me for butchering your name. He left it on Facebook Live. He says, prison is legal slavery. It is embedded in the laws of this country. I mean, it's hard to argue with that. It's definitely weaved into the fabric of this country, just like racism, white supremacy, and all the other isms here. That fits directly into the conversation we're having about, prison abolition versus prison reform. If this system is this egregious, should we just dismantle it? And if so, what are the alternatives? Brittany is saying, calling for communities to step up and be accountable and do the work that needs to be done when it comes to accountability and organizing. Their question is, so what do we do with the white supremacists and the killers and the people that shot Joshua Brown? Not everyone is killing people because they have a drug issue or because they're from poverty. Some of these people are killing people because they're privileged, because they're racist, because they're sexist, because they're entitled. So I want to know what we do with those people.
I mean, it's still never just that simple either. But before I start getting on my bag, we do have a caller, Keith, on the line, and I'm going to give him a chance to let his voice be heard. But Keith, let your voice be heard.
Thank you. First of all, shout out to Selena. I saw her about a year or so ago at the Apollo hosting for WHCR, and I thought she did a terrific job.
Thank you.
My question is, or something I've been confused about, there's been this push to close Rikers Island. And I'll just say on my part, I've been a little confused by that because I haven't felt like there's something in place that is superior to Rikers. In other words, I have no doubt that there's a level of cruelty that happens in the system, but if you take the same guards and you put them somewhere else, I don't see how that necessarily solves the problem. From my point of view, I think all they're going to do is close Rikers Island, open it up to some condominiums for like rich people or something where they have their own island, but all of the abuses that take place on Rikers Island will just be spread out throughout the 5 boroughs because I have not heard a plan that is superior to what's already in place. I'm hoping to get your thoughts on that, and I'll listen to that offline.
Thank you. And I'm going to throw it to Brittany, a member of No New Jails.
Hey, y'all. No new jails. We're closing records now. So here's the thing. This plan that the city is voting on, they're not voting to close Rikers Island. They're voting to build new jails. They're voting to build 4 new jails in the boroughs. They're also, the mayor's Office of Criminal Justice in de Blasio has also introduced 3 to 6 mental health jails and 1 to 2 women jails with nurseries in them. So this is what we're fighting against in New York City. So when you literally say, hey, they're going to close records, if you actually look at the city's plan, there is nothing in there that actually says that Rikers Island would close down. That is one. So what we end up with in New York City is the same amount of cages, jails, capacity as in when the war on drugs was at its peak. We also see that, the city will require the entire jail population in New York City to be moved to Rikers Island when DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and U.S. Coast Guards extended the security zone from LaGuardia to Rikers Island. And so this puts immigrant families, undocumented people, everyone that will be locked up on Rikers Island at risk. We know that ICE is expanding, so the questions become, if they built these borough-based jails with mixed use, they're literally telling Mott Haven, which we know is one of the poorest communities in New York City, in order for you to get a jail, in order for you to get a grocery store, it has to be in the same place as a jail.
Yeah. That's exactly what they're doing. They're saying you want affordable housing, we'll put it on top of the jail. And they're using private money to do this. So all we're doing is making, at least my opinion, all we're doing is deep ingraining private money into the prison systems even more. Any place where private money, I'm sorry about that, I'll let you go in a second, Bernie. Any place that private money is being involved in prisons, there's all of a sudden now a need to keep those prisons at capacity. There have been judges who have gone to jail and prison for this because a private prison was in the county somewhere, and all of a sudden they were giving kickbacks to judges to throw people in those jails and prisons because if it's not at capacity, then they're not getting public money. In other places, if those jails and prisons are not at capacity, then the state has to pay back those private companies. This is not helpful. This is nothing but just a nasty level of capitalism. Brittany, you had to say something too?
Yeah, so we know that, the big banks that just pulled out of private prisons, they're funding this plan. right? They're funding this. So I'm not hopeful. I'm really, 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 really scared. Like in 5-10 years, in 2 years, in 2021, the entire city council will be gone. How will Rikers Island close? There's no legal binding agreement. And so it's one, I mean, we don't need any more jails. If city council want to talk about conditions, most of those people who are on city council have been there for over 10 years. They did not care then. Why are you caring now? Because there's money on the table.
So here's my question for folks now, because you're saying we're talking about New York City because right now that's the big fight for closing Rikers Island, which is a jail that a lot of people know about. And it sounds like we want to get rid of this jail because jails and prisons don't work. But if they're not working, what should we do? Evan, you were talking about this a little bit. What do you think we should do? Like a hard, specific thing.
In place of like reforming or getting rid of prisons altogether?
Can we do that?
Because I want to know exactly what it would look like because I don't personally know what it would look like if there was no prison. I know you're talking about communities holding each other accountable, and I think that's really important for certain types of offenses, but I still believe there has to be something that is rehabilitation focused, but where there are certain people who just are a threat to society and they cannot be out there. And like you said, some of them are walking around, and that's also because the NYPD isn't prioritizing things correctly either. The NYPD has quotas. They focus on low-level crimes too. They are, crime and punishment, we were just talking about Edwin Raymond, details this greatly. But I do think there should be, I think the idea of prison as we know it should be torn down.
Yeah.
But the idea of taking someone out of public society and putting them in a place to rehabilitate that isn't just, a small cell with barely any sunlight coming in, with barely any activity, I don't think that makes anybody do better. And I think the current systems that are putting people in prison are terrible. But I think the prison itself needs to be reformed so that it's rehabilitation focused, and those type of people, if they successfully rehabilitate, can go back to society.
Selena?
I guess I would lean to more towards what Evan is saying, only because, again, I'm not as deeply ingrained in the issue. So forgive me, Brittany. And I want to be educated. Like, I want to understand that perspective. I want to be open-minded to it. But I think that if we could rehabilitate people in another setting, like you said, no one should be in a cage. No one should have lack of water and sunlight. That's cruelty.
Heat.
That's punishment, and that's against our Constitution. Like, we're not supposed to be doing that to people. We need to rehabilitate. The point that Alyssa made up in the beginning of the show was, why aren't we working on the systematic issues that are causing people to succumb to these means? It's literally people are victims of their own environment where, they can't get a job, they don't have access to good education, and they have to survive. So what is that? So a lot of them, that means scamming, selling drugs, or whatever they have to do just to put food on the table. And those are issues that need to be addressed. But for the rest of them, I don't, it's hard for me I feel internally conflicted to say that some of these people just need to be rehabilitated. Can Dylan Roof, a white supremacist who wanted to start a race war, could he be rehabilitated?
No, I don't think that happens to everybody. Whiteness is inherently toxic, bad, period. And I agree with you. I don't think rehabilitation actually is for everybody. I think there is a point where someone just cannot go back to society. I think Dylan Roof is a good example of that. But again, that is an extreme case. And for the most part, I do agree with what's been said with not throwing people in jail for low-level crimes and even certain violent crimes where they can be more held accountable and better rehabilitated by their own community. But I do think that we need to really flesh out what that looks like. Because I think this can actually be a very legitimate policy. Like, I think that you said that legislation can get behind.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, were you finished, Evan?
Yeah, I think so.
Sorry about that. All right, so folks, whenever we have a really good conversation, time flies by, and time has flown by today. I want to give folks just a really quick rapid-fire second to answer the question of, like, can the system be reformed? Yes or no? 10 seconds, why or why not? Brittany?
It cannot be reformed. Reform has gotten us here. They've been reforming jails here since over a century. It cannot be reformed.
Evan?
It can't be reformed as it is, as we know it. But if we change the conception of what holding someone accountable out of society is, I think it might be possible if it's rehabilitation focused.
I'm going to try to keep this quick because I understand that incremental change and reform, like Brittany said, is something that we've been trying to work on and pass. And then you have a Congress or a president or a Supreme Court who will overrule or dismantle all these little reform mechanisms that were just put in place. Like, it's like the system itself that we have is not working. And I understand that. I really, it's hard for me to say what needs to be done when we have laws on the book who will put somebody in prison for jumping a turnstile, or, you know, put somebody in prison for missing the jury duty. Like, it's the laws, it's the legislation. Yeah, it's like these laws are putting people in prisons, in cages for the most minuscule things. So it's literally the whole system itself. And I mean, I'm not advocating for us to all riot and try to overtake the government, but I understand the sentiment behind it. I'll just say that.
Dismantle the system.
Right.
First. Yeah.
So yeah, this system can't be reformed. I think Brittany is 1,000% right. This is what reform looks like in this system. The reform looks like maybe they'll open some new facilities so you can put more black and brown people in there, and maybe you won't put as many men there because now we know this, so you'll put more women in there, which is why women are the highest growing group that are going into jails and prisons by over 70%. And why? Because they're domestic violence survivors and they're addicted to drugs, or they're sex workers. The system cannot be reformed. We have to be really honest about what we're facing over here. And what we're really facing is white supremacy manifesting itself in just another way. And the way that it's manifesting itself in this piece is through the prison industrial complex. JT shouldn't have gone to prison, but JT shouldn't have had to live in an experience where she had kids and can only make $15 an hour to take care of her family, forcing her to go and do that thing. Just like my friend Eric shouldn't have got arrested and stuck in records for 2 years for smoking some weed. Prison is not about reforming, it's not about saving, it's not about helping. We have to destroy this entire thing and build something from scratch. I don't know what that looks like right now, but I do know that this ain't working. And I know if it was a whole bunch of white people buried under prisons, we would lift heaven and earth to change everything. Just like we're changing all of our drug laws now because Becky can't stop doing heroin. But with that being said, guys, we got to get out of here. This has been another action-packed episode of Let Your Voice Be Heard. You can find us wherever you find your podcasts, and if you want to support us with your dollars, we appreciate that too. Shout out to us on patreon.com/BeHeardRadio. We'll see you next week.